All right, so we are now going to move into our module on basically, it's going to cover the idea of mass culture, the Victorian era, and the emergence of the Western frontier. So we're kind of getting into this time period, moving out of the Gilded Age. We're going to it's kind of in conjunction with that, some of the things that are the same time frame as the Second Industrial Revolution. And then eventually we're going to get to the Progressive Era where we're going to try and fix a lot of these problems. But this moves more into the cultural side of the Gilded Age time frame, the Victorian era, building into that, and how that's going to affect society and culture of the United States and really the world during this point in time. So we're going to talk here about the last module. We talked about some of the problems that were going on. In the next module, we're going to talk about like liberalism and conservatism and communism and socialism and stuff of the 1900s. But like I said, we're going to kind of focus here on this time frame, looking back at the Victorian era culture and science, and even the pseudoscience that's kind of coming out of there. Like I said, it's really the same time frame as the last series of lectures, but I think that it's really more of a look at the people themselves rather than what is going on in society as a whole. Like, what are the people thinking? What are the people doing? And not everybody loves all the political stuff. I happen to. I think the political stuff is the fun stuff to talk about. But the isms of this time period are really important, and you need to make sure that you're ready to kind of understand and be able to talk about those when we get to the exam in a couple weeks. Because this is the third module. I believe the exam is after module 4 or 5, one of them. Now, along with the enormous economic activity that's really kind of taking place here, you also have some major political changes that are occurring in Europe over the course of the 19th century, so the 1800s. And a lot of this stuff we kind of have talked about already, but it kind of became a showcase for these momentous shifts in culture and learning and all of these things during this cultural era. And we're going to kind of give this time frame the title of Victorianism, or the Victorian era. And the reason we're doing that is because it is named after this lady right here, Queen Victoria. Okay. It's a culture in which, the middle class kind of starts to look at themselves in a different way. You have the elite and the wealthy. They're not nobility necessarily. Remember, it used to be that only the nobility were kind of rich and stuff, but now you have really an upper class and a middle class and a lower class. And it's during this time that the rich and elite and wealthy people are going to start to fear the lower class a little bit during the Victoria era. And it's really at the height of the British Empire and British imperialism. And I know that this is U.S. history, but I think you need to understand because this is really the undercurrent of some of the things that are really happening during the Gilded Age. And it really lasts for a long time because Queen Victoria reigns for, I don't know, like 64 years, something crazy. And again, it's the height of the British Empire. It's, the culture of top hats and dresses that cover every inch of the female body and being very conservative in terms of dress. Very strict gender norms. And really, it's during this time that you could almost classify it as like a pathological fear of sexuality. Like, if we let women show their arms, then men won't be able to control themselves. They'll just go crazy. It's also very important that they distinguish classes from each other, and one of the ways that they were able to do this because of the industrialization and textiles and stuff is that we're going to start making each individual class dress differently. And, almost like you could, like class uniforms, right? If you had this stuff, then you were part of this class. And if you wore this stuff, that you're part of this class. And it's really during this time we start to see this starting to happen, like top hats. If you had a big, tall top hat, that meant you were like wealthy. And then, but if you weren't super wealthy and you went and got a top hat, somebody'd come over and like knock it off your head, be like, you're not wealthy enough to wear a top hat. People will think that you're rich and confuse you for somebody that matters. I'm like, dang, bruh. Like, it was very strictly enforced. If you were like middle class, you had to wear like one of those little bowlers. You know what I mean? Like, no. Not exactly. No. No, it's like a little hat that has like the short brim that kind of bends up, you know, like, yeah. And then if you were poor, you had to wear like a little like cloth cap that you could put in your back pocket, right? Like, the more inconvenient your hat was to carry around, the richer you were. You know what I'm saying? Basically. And it was basically the same for all clothes. The longer it took you to put them on, the richer you were. Look at how many buttons that has. She must be rich, right? Gosh, she's wearing 2 corsets. Must be rich. And a corset, that's an invention of the devil anyways. Kind of, but yeah, but they were like, it was terrible. Yeah. I bet, no, she has a corset on right here in this picture. Bro, that's disrespectful.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm like, dang.
Bro, that's the Queen of England.
She was.
I mean, she died a while back, I guess, but there might still be some of her left in the ground.
I mean, there was a lot of. Yeah, but I said.
Bro, that is rude. All right. Oh my gosh. And also, you end up with a lot of things expressed in like racial terms, and that's going to become a definite problem as well. Like I said, Victorian ideas evolve around rigid gender norms, and that's kind of the point that we're getting from these 2 images that you can see here. You can see top hat, and the women had to wear dresses with all these layers and all this stuff, very stereotypical. There was a desire for security. Again, they want to define social classes so that, you know, I'm wealthy and I want everybody to know I'm wealthy, and dressing wealthy makes me wealthy and makes everybody treat me like I'm wealthy, and therefore that keeps me from ever being poor. I know, it's weird. People in the upper class, they literally consider themselves better in every way than people from the lower class or from the farm, you know. And it's really classism is really what it is. And it's very dangerous even today that we look at people and we look at how they're dressed and where they come from and how they speak, and we think that they're lower class than us or that we're better than them, and that's messed up. Very obviously, this is a time where the British are dominating the globe. They end up with the idea of, you know, that poor people are going to be a threat to social elites, and the threat of sexual impropriety comes with a lot of problems. If you're kind of a floozy, then that could lead to like financial ruin. Like, legitimately. If you were immoral, acting immorally in public, then you might lose business deals, or you get what I'm saying? Like, it was very much strictly enforced. Women were not allowed to go out and drink in public and act crazy. And if they did, their husbands might lose money because they were like, you can't even control your wife and she's terrible and all this stuff, right? Now, behind closed doors, they are living the extreme of debauchery. But in public, it's very important that we distinguish ourselves from poor people, and so that people think that we are the important ones of society, right? And so it's a very, I guess, shameful culture is the best way to kind of describe it. It's a culture in which shame is a very, very highly used tool to control people. You know, it's the world from which Sigmund Freud, who is a very, a great pioneer of psychology, he kind of characterized it by the suppression of natural instincts. He was mostly talking about sexuality, but this idea also goes to like other kind of modes and codes of behavior as well that were all rooted in the idea of insecurities and shame and the idea that we have to separate ourselves from the bad things so that people don't think we're bad people. And that, again, is just to make sure that they protect their status in society more than anything else. Of course, human nature being what it is, people are going to seek to justify those kinds of views. And there's almost this internal mechanism by which they go about trying to explain their superiority over other people. And it's kind of messed up. Like, it's not kind of, it really is messed up. And they start to believe in all of these really faulty things that are just not true at all, okay? And they're going to use those to justify the ways that they mistreat other people. And this is really, really big. Again, 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, Civil War leading up to it. Remember how they thought black people just weren't smart enough or weren't capable of controlling society or being set free, right? That's all coming out of these Victorian era ideas that black people are just inferior, that we're not all one human race. You're just inferior. And because of that, you need to stay in your place, right? They wanted to justify why they had money. And it couldn't be because, oh, I worked hard. Because if you say, well, I'm rich because I worked hard, then that means that somebody else who's not already rich could work hard and become rich and join your social class. And they don't want that because they want to make sure they're the only ones there. They have all the power and nobody takes it away. So we have to justify it in another way. We can't say that you can earn wealth. You can't earn being in high class. You can't learn how to be high class. You just are born that way. And one of the major justifications for this is that they say God gave it to us. They start using religion. God has blessed us with this wealth, clearly. And God is clearly punishing you. God gives me his favor because look how rich I am. And God clearly doesn't give you his favor because look how poor you are. Right? And it's stupid. We are so pious. We act so good. We don't go drinking in the street like you riffraff do. And so God has given us this wealth. It's like, no, you idiots. Your parents were rich and they just left you a bunch of money when they died. That has nothing to do with who you are, right? But that's what they're really trying to do. They said that their status is proof of their ethics and their morality. Not just, that they had luck by being born to the right family or that they had good family connections, right? No. We are in our core better than you because God loves us more. And then, they look for things in science to back this up. They actually start creating science to justify that they were right. And so, they become champions of the notion that everyone gets what they deserve and that science is going to ratify and clarify and defend this natural social order and that the working class is just, they have no ability to be like us. And eventually this is going to lead to some major problems because people are not going to keep putting up with this snooty crap from rich people. But again, they're going to find ways to scientifically validate their mentality. If we return now to this idea of like upper, middle, and upper class family fearing the lower classes, and there's some ways that we can really break down this ideology in Victorian life. And it's a lived reality. So, they have this mindset, but it's actually what's happening in the real world also, that they fear social degeneration. And they think that this is going to happen. And so, they believe that alcoholism and drug use, those are bad. However, as drugs and alcohol become cheaper and more available, it's the very people who say, oh, we're moral, we're right, that have access to drugs and alcohol and begin to abuse it at high rates behind closed doors. Urbanization, cities and jobs and all of these things that really make this upper middle class, they start abusing these things while still trying to uphold this superiority of morality, okay? And it's all of this stuff. Cocaine, gets really popular during this time frame. Cocaine, yeah, like, in fact, cocaine was originally seen as like a medicinal pick-me-up. Like, hey, you tired at the end of the day? Get your doctor to give you some cocaine. It'll perk you right up. Yeah, literally, you go to the like drugstore and be like, yes, my doctor said that these kids are really, after working, these kids are really hard on me, and I'm pretty tired, and I need to get the house clean, so hit me up with an 8-ball of that cocaine. And they'd go to the pharmacy and get them some cocaine. I get 8, never mind. It's a common parlance term for drugs. I read the Urban Dictionary. All right. Yeah. And so then also, like the rich, they also have access to other crazy things. Like in a lot of upper class parties and stuff, like it was very popular to like take strawberries and dip them in like ether.
Ethernet?
No, like ether, like opium, like. Yeah, you'd take it and like dip them, and then you'd eat them, and everybody just be like, like, oh, what a great party, huh? Like liquid heroin almost, like morphine, like dipping strawberries in morphine and just eating them, and just be like, oh, right? And this was all like the same people again who are like, oh, poor people are just worse than us, even though they're eating so much that like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But it's other drug uses, and really what's interesting is that like some of the novels during this time period are really meant to exemplify this, what is kind of considered the monster mentality. To paint these people as, frauds. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the book, is actually an allegory to the idea that rich people of the time have a good side, but they also have this monster side where they go and they have these debaucherous events where they eat and drink and they do drugs and they do all this stuff. But then you have this cleaned up version that is in front of everybody and is a doctor and is well respected. But then on the other side, you have the monster. And this is really a insight into the idea of that's what high society is doing right now in front of everybody. It was actually written to be a critique of society, of the Victorian era. So we read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and you're like, oh, this is an interesting story. Understand what it's really doing. It's setting up the contrast between how rich people portrayed themselves and what was actually going on with rich people. They were destroying people's lives. Andrew Carnegie and John Rockefeller, who set up these monopolies and were paying people and paying children 5 cents a day to go climb inside a blast furnace and clean it out, fall asleep, get molten iron poured on their heads in the morning, are living like kings and lighting cigars with $100 bills. They look great, but underneath they're getting drunk and having small children killed. You know what I'm saying? Dracula is another one that is very, very much pointing out the hypocrisy of social elites. This great count that lives in a big giant house, but secretly he's really a monster that drinks the blood of ordinary Americans or ordinary people. You see the connection of what they're trying to say. It's a commentary is really what it is. And it kind of just shows the terrible beasts that are underneath the surface of these respectable exteriors that are portrayed. And they're monsters, and they give evidence that, oh, the elite, they're virtuous, but in contrast, they're really not. Now, again, most gender norms, male writers and theorists or even scientists claim that men and women were, opposite. Men are rational and forceful and naturally more courageous. And they kind of contrast that with the writing of the time that said women are irrational. But they're gentle and demure, and women, women, you're just, I know that you want to get upset about everything, but you're supposed to be gentle and just go with the flow and, just kind of stand behind your man. He'll protect you and all of this stuff. The sexism here is obviously, it doesn't have to be explained more than that, but it's very dominant male view. Social classes are dressed increasingly alike. Sensible, trousers and jackets, different hats for different classes. But women, you have very, very tight corsets. You see it in movies and TVs of that time, very frustrating and awkward for women. But it's very clear gender rigidity. And it's putting very strict and stifling restrictions on women and maintaining those, okay? Now we're going to shift gears, talk about science and pseudoscience. The idea of this slide here is it gives you all the science that takes place during this time frame on the left, all very, very important. And on the right, you have pseudoscience, which is the messed up stuff that they just created to justify what they were doing. So there's some good stuff and some bad stuff, right? Medicine, more advancements in biology, bacteria and germ theory, right? Microscopes, major ramifications here. But then again, you have pseudoscience like that is used to justify racism and genderism and misogyny, and they say, oh, we're going to back that up, and then you have the idea of the unfit. And again, this is science that is false science. It's not real. They made it up and then made up the data and then made up the results and then said, look, there you go. And yeah. So in medicine, by far the most significant thing that happens in the time period is the advancements in medicine, which would be probably a very good question for a short response. So if you get that, then maybe this would be a good place to come back to. Staggering significance, all right? You have Louis Pasteur, who kind of discovers germ theory. He understands what actually makes people sick. People didn't know before. They thought it was all different kinds of things, evil spirits, God was punishing them, Sam. And, yeah. But he provides the basis for the household term pasteurized, which is the idea of killing all the germs before you package something up, so that it's germ-free and you can keep it for a lot longer. And it shows microorganisms and fermentation and disease, and all of these things are going to be answered. Now, it's in its infancy, and his research, though, is going to lead to even more important things. He creates the first vaccines. He creates, we have the first vaccines show up, anthrax, we get, we kind of cover that. We're able to conquer that in cattle. We end up with a vaccine for the dreaded rabies, and that's game-changing because anybody in here ever had rabies? Have you really? How many shots did you have to get? Yeah, even today, you still have to get like 23 shots. And if you didn't get those 23 shots, bro, you know what happens? Like, yeah, I'm telling you, like, rabies is no joke. Like, it used to kill, rabies killed a lot of people. Like, it really did. It was really, really bad. And so basically, they're fighting disease, right? Which is huge. It's going to make a big, 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 big difference throughout this. Past years' work shows human beings how human beings actually acquire disease and how to fight them and all of that. Hospitals become cleaner and sanitation develops. And it's the bedrock of medicine, basically. This idea that, better plumbing, better sewer, better, don't drink poop water. Like, that makes you sick because we can literally see the germs in there. You get smallpox, you get measles vaccines. And if any of your people are like, if any of your parents are like anti-vaxxers, like, please stop doing that. Like, get your vaccines. Like, they're important. Like, you don't have to take the ones that, like, they make up in, like, 6 months. But, like, the ones that are proven to have, like, worked, like measles and smallpox and, that stuff, like, get those, please. And give them to your kids. Because, like, I think that I saw something like they had the first measles outbreak in, like, 90 years in the United States, like, a month or so ago. We haven't had measles in the United States in 100 years. People are like, well, measles vaccines make you autistic. It's like, no, it doesn't. Like, people literally blame autism on, like, vaccines. They're like, well, my kid at 6 months was fine, and now they're at 2 years after they got their vaccines, and they're not fine. I was like, well, what's wrong with them? They said they're still at, like, the 6-month mark, in development. It's like, well, maybe that was always going to happen. And they were fine at 6 months because they were supposed to be at 6 months. And then they got stuck there. But it wasn't because of the vaccines. There's no link whatsoever. But there is a link between, the reemergence of major terrible diseases. No, I don't think we have a vaccine for Ebola. Just don't eat monkey brains. There's also a major paradigm shift in science that allows a lot of society to kind of justify, like we said, how they act. During this time period, Charles Darwin comes in with the whole origins of species and natural selection, and Darwin was a moron. To be honest with you, he not a moron, but does anybody know what Darwin's training was in? Geology, yeah. Did I tell you all that last year? No. Yeah, Charles Darwin was a geologist. No, he was a geologist. And then he was like, I'm going to go look at birds. Like, that's the dude that invented the theory of evolution. A guy who's trained to look at rocks. So, yeah, go ahead with that. And so he's actually not the first person to believe that this happened. Alfred Wallace in 1858 actually proposed evolution. Darwin's legacy is he theorized how species evolved. Now, I'm not a macroevolutionist, I'm not a macroevolutionist. Like, I'm not someone who believes that humans came from monkeys and monkeys came from whatever else. Yeah, something stupid like that. That's the dumbest thing ever. There's no proof in that whatsoever. Zero.
You believe in evolution, Coach Remy?
I believe in the idea of interspecies evolution. Like the idea that we are as a human species evolving to specialize to our environment. I believe that species evolve within themselves to adapt. We adapt, which is really a way of evolving. We have adapted as a species of humans to be taller over the last 100 years.
No way he didn't get that.
Yeah, but even you, 300 years ago, would have been the tallest person in your tribe. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have adapted to be taller. Why? Well, it's an adaptation to how we get our food. 300 years ago, 1,000 years ago, everybody had to grow their own food, and you spent a great amount of your time close to the ground, bent over. So that would inhibit you from getting taller. I mean, that is a real adaptation. And you see the height adaptation taking place predominantly in the countries that advanced technologically first. Hey, and it lags behind in civilizations where they lag behind in industrialism. The earlier a country advanced, the taller their people tend to be in that culture. It's kind of a real thing that happens. I think that is a way of evolving. But I don't believe that the more we fly in planes, we'll learn how to fly and become birds. That's stupid. So, right. And so, we are made in God's image. I think that he made us the way we were supposed to be. But it does have a huge impact on science today because people are stupid. But it's extremely influential, and it evolves in societies. It goes into education and learning theories, and it's another extremely significant paradigm shift outside of germ theory is the idea of natural selection, and that is how evolution takes place in Darwin's theory, and that there's genetics, and that is the work of Gregor Mendel. Y'all probably heard of Mendel, yeah, the Punnett squares and all that stuff, and why? But he's interesting. It is really interesting. If you think about the idea of genetics, I think that we've gone way too far on some of that, where we can actually engineer our children. If you have enough money, you can engineer your children, which is weird. Did y'all know that? That's actually possible. You can basically order your kid. You can have the DNA strand altered. It's super crazy. Now, what are the implications of that? I don't know. It's dangerous. I know that. But that kind of starts during this time period as well. You also have the emergence of the understanding of atoms and the periodic table and the understanding of what's actually happening with different substances. That's all taking place during this time. You have psychology, Pavlov, Freud. Pavlov's dogs that's an interesting concept. One of the funniest examples of that was there's an episode of The Office. Do y'all ever watch The Office? Hilarious show.
I like the chili episode.
Yeah, the Altoids episode. Where it's Jim is every time he turns on his computer, it does that the Windows sound, the do-do-do-do, or whatever it is. And then he's like, hey, Dwight, you want an Altoid? And so then he does it over and over and over. And so every time that sound comes on, he offers him an Altoid. And then one time he starts his computer, and Dwight's he's like, what? What are you doing? He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then he's like, my mouth is it tastes bad. It's very dry all of a sudden. And it's the whole idea of conditioning someone, a conditioned response. It's a very interesting thing. I'm hoping my sociology class, we're going to get to this point because conditioning is super interesting. You can really manipulate people with conditioning. It is hilarious. It's really kind of weird, and they don't even have to realize that you're doing it. But we do it to each other all the time. And Pavlov kind of figured this out, this idea of a conditioned response. He did it with dogs, which every time he rang a bell, he fed them. And what he realized is that every time they heard that bell, their mouth started watering because dogs' mouths water so that when they eat food, that they can break that food down, that every time he rang the bell, that he could make the dog's mouth water after a certain amount of time. It's really interesting how to do that. And so a triggered response and a conditioned response, it's super interesting. That's all happening. And then you have Sigmund Freud, who is says you're in love with your mother. So, sorry guys, you are. It's weird. We marry people like our mothers. Huh? I mean, I'm just telling you. You find people that treat you emotionally as your mother did because you're secretly in love with her. Yeah, that's what Sigmund Freud said. It's more of the emotional response. Huh? Well, it's because you associate everything, you associate your mother with love is what basically ends up happening. So you associate her traits and the way she treats you and all of that with love. So like, then you end up finding people that are like that. It's weird. So sorry, guys.
Does your wife look like your mom?
No, she does not look like my mom. Gosh, not really.
It's not your love. Wait, so is it the other way around?
I don't know what it is.
You look like her mom. I look for a mom. That's
So we come to the very unfortunate topic of the pseudosciences. It's important that we talk about what happens if science is unchecked by morality and ethics and philosophy or religion. And the bottom line is that if science is left unchecked and nobody's really saying things and making sure that they're not lying, devastatingly false things can happen. This is no more clear than with what becomes known as social Darwinists, which claim that non-white races are just inherently inferior to white people and that that non-white people reached a certain stage of evolution but stopped while the white race continued. Yeah, but so they would say that, like, they would say white people are humans and that black people are like the link between monkeys and humans, that they only half evolved. That anybody who is not white is just in different stages of evolution from monkeys. That's what they believed. Y'all, and so look, you look at this, legitimately, they're like, this is what a white person's skull looks like. This is what a black person's skull looks like. This is what a monkey skull looks like. See, black people's skulls look like monkey skulls. Which is not true. It doesn't matter who drew it. They drew it and then put it in textbooks and sold it like it was real science.
So imagine you're opening your textbook on this lesson and you just look left to see like your black friend. You're just like
Yeah, but you didn't have black people and white people sitting in school together.
oh, that's right. You didn't have like. Oh, okay.
Right. You'd be like, hey, black slave, bring me my textbook that says you're less than me.
I'm gonna learn you something. Just teach them.
No, but they really did, because then they'd show it to black people and be like, see, this is you with this big old skull looks like a monkey. This is me with a white person's skull. See, that's why you're a slave. And then that's how they kind of did that. Yeah, they were racists. Yeah, I'm glad they're all dead. I am. Bunch of racist piece of crap. God made us all the same, everybody. Your exterior has absolutely nothing to do with your soul.
We all bleed red.
Thanks. But literally, it's goofy, it's fake, it's not real. They made it up and then sold it as science. And again, this is the dangers when science is just kind of left to itself and people are just doing this in a vacuum and then writing textbooks about it. And then everybody's like, oh, well, they seem smart. They must be telling the truth. Oh, they quote all this research. And it's research that they made up so that they could justify what they said. Like they were con artists who made a living off of literally knowing they were lying and then selling it just to make themselves feel better. It's kind of crazy. They also believed in social Darwinism when it came to like people like alcoholics or women who didn't get married. They're like, oh, there must just be something wrong with her. She hadn't been married yet, and she's like 17. She must be something wrong with her. These people did not believe in charity. They believed that if you gave to charity, that you were supporting keeping people alive that shouldn't be alive. They took survival of the fittest and applied it to humans. They said, if you can't take care of yourself, you don't deserve to live. Sorry. And that's dangerous because basically that's the same people who also said that like special needs kids, they should just die because they can't take care of themselves. They never will be able to. If you keep them around, you're just giving them a harder life. It'd be nicer just to let them die. Yeah, that's what they believed. Same idea as saying that black people are less than white people. They'd be like, just take that boy with the big forehead and throw him in the river. That's the same idea. It's no different. It's just as absurd as the white and black people thing. You get what I'm saying? So, it's terribly immoral. It soon would lead to the field of eugenics, which is these programs that wanted to sterilize the unfit and create a master race of people that were the most evolved. Yeah. Like the Nazis, master race, whole idea. Or like Margaret Sanger. Do y'all know who that is? Margaret Sanger. She was a eugenicist. She believed in master race theory. She's the person who invented Planned Parenthood. Yeah, big supporter of abortion there. Yeah, but she only thought that you should put abortion clinics in black neighborhoods so that the blacks would kill themselves off and that more white people would be born. And that's why all the Planned Parenthoods were built in inner cities, because the person who invented Planned Parenthood wanted to open up and give access to abortions to black people only so that black people would murder their own babies so that there weren't more of them. That's a fact. Look her up. Margaret Sanger.
You